and glad you are here. We're going to be talking about how to grow in-person worship attendance this fall. And so if I don't know you, I want to introduce myself. I'm Reverend Nicole Reilley, and I've been an elder in the conference for over 30 years. I have served churches that are as small as 60 people and as large as 500. I've always had a church growth focus, and so I've always worked with each of the churches I have served to help them to grow and to reach new people. I've been a house church planter during part of my ministry. I've helped to plant about a dozen house churches, and I also led my own house church for, I guess, about 3 years. Excuse me, getting over a cold. I was the director of new ministries for the CalPAC annual conference, which means that I worked to help new church starts happen and also to work with existing congregations and bring them into greater vitality. I have a book called Expanding the Expedition Through Digital Ministry that focuses on using digital ministry in the local church. And since last year, I transitioned out of the local church because of a health issue, and now I spend my time doing two big things. I coach clergy half-time, and then I do social media for churches half-time. And I am the host of the Clergy Wellness Podcast. So a little bit just about the Clergy Wellness Podcast, if you're not familiar with this resource. I release a new episode each week, and the focus is for clergy, but I think it's really for anyone who's in a helping profession, who wants to be healthier and who wants to be aware of themselves and how to live life a little more fully. So you'll see some of our recent episodes, and you can find the Clergy Wellness Podcast on Spotify and Apple and anywhere else that you would look for it. So we are there. So let's start. I want to start with the numbers. So a reality check. Since 1990, so that's not that long ago, the UMC in-person attendance is down 40%. And the average United Methodist Church has 50 people worshiping in it on Sunday. Now, there are a lot of cultural drivers of decline. And I mention that because I think a lot of times we look toward ourselves or our church or what we're doing wrong, and we don't take into account that the world has changed a lot over these last, certainly 40 years, but certainly even longer than that. The world is a different place. And I recently read, I thought, a much more inclusive article about church decline. And it shared how some of the biggest issues that we may not think about are the end of the Cold War. Now, what they meant by that was when the Cold War was going, there was a push in America for people to attend worship. And there was a phrase about people being godless communists. And so after the Cold War ended, people who were attending church, which was a significant number of people just to be pro-American, started drifting away. In addition, a huge drive of cultural decline, a decline of people attending worship, is the rise of the internet. People used to only have those in their own community, those in their own churches, those in their own towns. The internet changed all that and opened up people's minds to the opportunities and possibilities beyond Sunday worship. And then the last thing I'll lift up is herd mentality, which basically means that the fewer people who go to church, the fewer people who go to church, right? It's kind of like if nobody goes, less people go, because it is a herd mentality. We are herd people, and if nobody's doing it, it's really hard to get people to do it. So these are just some reasons for the cultural drivers of decline for the local church. But the church has possibilities, even if the culture is pulling away from going to church. So the church has possibilities and ways of reaching people, but the church has not responded well or systematically to what's going on. So the church's part in decline is a lack of a plan to reach out to people, to welcome people, and to incorporate people. So very few churches, and I coach churches as well as clergy, very few churches have a plan in place to reach new people. So what can we do? Well, we can put together plans to reach new people, and then we can do the work of welcoming new people, and then we can incorporate new people into the life of the church. So that's what we're going to focus on today. How do we do what we can do instead of bemoaning the culture or the world today? What are the things that God has given us to do to be part of reaching people and sharing God's love? So, how do we reach new people? That is an important question to ask. And many times in the local church, we don't even ask the question. The number one way that new people come to a church is they are invited by current church members and attenders. Yes, there are things we should do with paid ads and with banners and flyers and all those things, but they are really a support for. They are some seeds we sow, but really the number one way, and it's not just the number one way, it's the number one way and two way and three way, all the way down to 99. It's like the highest stuff, the most important things is to help our people who are part of our churches reach new people. So I want to focus on a topic that I think is a really key topic if we want to grow in-person worship attendance. And that is, how do we help our current people reach out and invite? How do we help those who are part of our church currently, who know our church, who like our church, who come to our church? How do we help them invite others? This is a really key skill, and it's a skill anyone can learn, and it's a skill we as leaders can teach. You know, think of it this way. If you go to a restaurant you love, you share it with a friend. If you go to a particular shop that you enjoy, you share that with a friend. We already have this habit, but we need to learn how to do this in our own churches. And so that's one of the things I want us to talk about. So getting your church to invite is a key skill for your church to learn. And it's one of those skills that you have to work on pretty much every single week. And a general invitation to Sunday morning worship isn't enough. And by that, I mean, if you want to help your people learn to invite, you're thinking bigger than just helping them learn to invite to Sunday morning or only to Sunday morning. An invitation to getting people to come on Sunday morning is seldom enough. And here's what I mean. If you tell your congregation to invite their friends to church, you will notice they seldom do. And on average, the statistic in the United Methodist Church is people only invite once every 38 years. Okay. So that's what we're trying to work against. that the average United Methodist in the average church only invite someone to attend worship with them once every 38 years. A general invitation to worship seldom motivates the people in the pews to invite their family and friends. Why is that? Well, just for the reality that Sunday comes every week, and many people who might be open to inviting someone think, I'll invite, but just another time. Let me give you an example from my own life about how to address this. So one of my favorite clothing stores is J. Jill. And every year they send me a postcard in August with a 20% discount. And this discounts for the whole month of August because August is my birthday month. And I hadn't been shopping there in a while. I just hadn't been getting out and doing that. And I'm not a big mall shopper, so I didn't really want to go. But the postcard made me think about going, made me consider it. And then the last week in August, I actually got a phone call from them saying, just want to remind you that this is happening and we want you to come and not miss out on the discount. So even though I wasn't planning on going, even though I had a lot of other things going on, I made it a priority to go and to go shopping. There was a reason, and it was a compelling reason. Sunday morning doesn't tend to be that compelling for a lot of our people. We want to give them something special, something exciting, something different, something of quality that they can invite to. So the big idea here is something that I've learned from church planters that I've coached. They do a thing called Community Sundays. Community Sundays are Sundays that a church planter will offer for the people in their church and for the community to get their current people to invite. So I'm going to share with you some Community Sunday ideas. These are ideas that your people can then invite their friends to. Now, here's the big thing. It isn't just about offering a bunch of things that are going on. That's great, but really what it's about is helping your people develop the skill to invite people to these events. So two different things. You really are focused on not only the event, but you're focused on helping your people learn to invite to these events. So I'm going to share 12 of them with you, actually 13. I'm going to share some with you. And I would recommend that if you want to grow your in-person worship attendance, you start doing 6 to 12 of these every year. Some of them you're going to see you're already doing them. But what will change is the focus. What will change is how you're thinking of these as events that others can invite to. So let's look at these Community Sundays made especially for people to invite their family and friends. I'm going to share 13. The slide says 12 because I'm going to start off with something that I think is really the foundational piece, and it's a foundational piece for our Sundays and what we need to offer on a regular Sunday to be attractive to the culture around us and for our people to invite. And so we'll start there. So Community Sunday number 0 is to preach about relevant sermon series, to preach a relevant sermon series each Sunday. A lot of pastors preach lectionary, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can actually take your lectionary texts and figure out how to do a sermon series. But you need to offer a group of texts or a group of Sundays that actually connects to the questions people are asking in the world. So you need relevant topics. So top 5 concerns in the world and how the gospel answers those concerns. Or a big one, I think, is the series Unchristian. It comes from an older book that was a study about how many of the things people assume about Christians are not true. So it's a series for skeptics, and it talks about, is the church homophobic or is the church sexist? Another relevant sermon series is at the beginning of the year, kick off the new year kind of series. If people are looking for a church, oftentimes they try to go back the beginning of the year. I have on my slide, I have 4 different series. One of the sermon series was called Burning Question. One was A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and Facing Life's Giants. And then the last one is actually a New Year's series, Jumpstart Your Life, Your Joy, and Your Faith. So create publicity postcards that you have available to give to your congregation to give to their friends. When you're going to start a new series, before you start your sermon, if you're the pastor or if you're a layperson, this could happen during the announcement time. You are giving a little bit of a spiel for it, something like, in a couple weeks, we're starting a new series and we're talking about facing life's giants. And I know you have friends and family who are struggling with some things right now. This is the series to invite them to. And I'd like the ushers to come forward and hand out a postcard. I also would mention at the end, at the benediction, that can be another place to mention it, but you're talking about it every week. You're handing postcards to your people every week to get them to invite. I've even seen churches that offer a prize. So if you bring a newcomer, you get entered in a drawing, a fun way of doing it. At Valencia, they did it with a summer set for your summer fun. So this is the most important idea for me. And if you don't try anything else, this is the one I recommend you do try, that you think about what are the sermon series, what are the things that the pastor can talk about in worship that actually connect to where people are in their lives, so they want to hear what's being said. Number 2, blessing of the animals. The blessing of the animals is a thing that a lot of our churches do. It's a way to get the community involved. People do love to bring their animals. So offer an opportunity to drawing for a gift or a basket or cards. You're going to put a basket there, and people will be able to put their name in a basket in order to be part of the drawing. It's a way for you to collect information. You might even make homemade treats or have a gift. And you're going to want to advertise this one on social media. So this should be something that appears on your social media feed and on Nextdoor, which is a community-based social media platform. Next, be out there Sunday. So this is an idea to be working beyond what is going on inside your church. So this could be a community service outside of the church. You start with an opening time in your worship sanctuary. You're going to do a little bit of an opening, and then you're going to go out and do service in the community, maybe working with the local food pantry or volunteering at the hospital or doing a park cleanup. Offer lunch to follow and a bounce house, so people are not just sent out to do good work, but then also come back to talk about that. And have opportunities on your campus for those who can't go out and serve in the community to do, and also for families to have an opportunity to serve. So you're going to advertise this in your community, that this is a way for people to come and get involved. Number 3, Community Sunday idea, rise against hunger. Rise against hunger is something I see a lot of people doing right now, a lot of churches, and it's a great way to connect with other service agencies. Offer opportunities to your congregation and to the community at large to fund the event as well as to work at it. Use social media and use banners to spread the word that this is happening and community help is needed. And then focus on this in worship. Rise Against Hunger has resources. I'm sure there are videos that are out there as well. that you would build this up for 4 or 5 weeks before it actually happens. A lot of churches may have a tradition of doing this, but for a newcomer, it may be something brand new. So a minute video for 5 weeks before you actually do it is a way to get people involved and focusing on inviting their family and friends to be part of making a difference. Number 4 is blessing of the backpacks. This is something a lot of our churches already do. Create a blessing card for backpacks, and it then hangs on their backpack all year. Create a postcard that you would then be giving out to the kids in your Sunday school to give to their friends in the neighborhood. You want to do a blessing not only for the kids, but also for the teachers in worship. And connect it with something fun after church, like a barbecue. Or if you can't do that, something special for food after worship. Use social media to get the word out. Community Sunday idea number 5, candlelight walk 4. You know, we live in a time where there are not only events such as violence, but there's also environmental things that happen, fires and floods, that call us as people of faith to be out in the community sharing a word of hope and peace. So response to violence or national loss, use a candlelight walk for unity. You can use real candles or battery powered. Start with a prayer at the church and a scripture, and then give participants something to take home so they can continue to do this prayer work around this topic. And contact a local paper to cover this. Some of the things you're doing may be too religious for the local paper to cover, but something like this is not. And this is a way for you to get the word out about the church in the paper. Community Sunday idea number 6, Aloha Sunday. So in the United Methodist tradition, one of the things we do is we welcome or reaffirm the appointment of our pastors the first Sunday in July. And so turning that into a party opportunity can be really helpful. Hawaiian theme with dress, fellowship, giving lays out to people, celebrating the ministry of the pastor and the church in partnership, and having it be a real summer focus. So this can be a nice thing to invite family and friends to, because you're going to be having Hawaiian food, you're going to be having a bounce house, you're going to be having some special things, and it celebrates the ministry of that church in the community. And this is one of those events that every church I've done it at, it stays, it continues to be a tradition because it's a party, and people in the summer especially love a party. Community event number 7 idea, Advent celebration. This is one of my very favorite ones, and I think one that gives one of the biggest bangs for its buck. The idea is that you celebrate Advent. Most churches celebrate Advent for 4 weeks, and it's a kickoff for Advent that first Sunday in Advent in the evening. So it's 2 parts. The first part is you offer dinner and crafts and a photo booth for people to get their Christmas card picture taken, whatever it is that you offer. Sometimes we would do a making of an Advent wreath that went with the theme. So that's the first hour. Then the second hour is a worship service. And in that worship service is where we talk about the significance of the decorations for the tree. We would use chrismons. We would teach about the season, and we would introduce what the theme was for our Advent season. Now, we would sell tickets for the first hour because we're providing a meal and crafts and things like that. And the second hour was free. We would also add in a hot chocolate station, a living nativity that the youth would do, and some cookies as well. So this is a great event. And when I was part of a church that did this, people not only came, but this was a huge event that they invited their family and friends to. Community idea number 8. Christmas Eve. Now, we all do Christmas Eve, but what I'd invite you to do is to see the service through a newcomer's eyes. How do we make that service amazing? Do a sponsored post or a Facebook ad for what you're doing during Christmas time. Put a banner up to welcome the community. Spend your dollars here to make it a Christmas to remember. And then do at your Christmas Eve service a special welcome for newcomers and a special invitation for them to come back in January. So you're promoting what your next series is so people will come back. Community Sunday idea number 9, New Year's Sermon Series. So what does attract a newcomer in the new year? Google for what others have done to inspire you, but the new year is always an opportunity to reach new people. During this season, we would always offer some special opportunities on our campus for newcomers to feel at home. So whether that was time with the pastor at the local coffee shop everyone was invited to, or an opportunity to tour the campus and really understand the church a little better, or even special classes that would be helpful right after the holidays. So class on parenting or class on dealing with grief. Make use of social media and postcards to get the word out. Community Sunday number 10, Graduation Sunday. This is something you might already be doing, but you want to think about it from the perspective of not only the graduates, but their family and friends. So celebrate the graduates of all ages, offer special Bibles or devotional gift or a college care package. Create videos of the graduates as they were children and now as they graduate. Invite seniors to speak and to share their faith, and offer a special blessing for all of them. Offer resources during this time. Parents are often in a huge time of transition as their kids graduate and move on. What resources can you offer not only those parents, but their friends during this season? Community Sunday number 11, Lenten Kickoff. Like the Advent kickoff, this takes this important season in the church year and invites people to enter into it more deeply. So create a focus for Lent, which includes small groups. Have an Ash Wednesday dinner and a kickoff. Set the theme for the service and for the season in worship, and create expectations of what God can do in the season of Lent. Have a small group sign up at your Lenten kickoff. So you're getting everybody in small groups, and invite people to do really big things during the season of Lent. Get their attention by doing a special focus on 40 days of prayer, or reading the whole Bible in 40 days, or the New Testament in 40 days. And the last one I'll share with you, Community Sunday idea number 12, host special trainings. Hosting a training for LGBTQI allies, or understanding autism, or addressing the suicide epidemic, whatever issues are important to your congregation, partnering with a local group to help those happen in your local church and inviting others is a great way to connect. Do lots of publicity and create a postcard for the congregation so they invite. Have a sign-in for the event to track newcomers. Add them to your email list. And offer next steps at the training, whether that's a support group, an additional connection to follow up with more Zoom and discussion, or a resource list. So these are a lot of different ideas, and they're not, of course, the only ideas, right? There's tons of things you could do. It's really, these ideas are to get your juices going, to get you thinking creatively about what would excite your congregation to invite their family and friends. Now, here's a couple things that are super important. Get the word out. Use social media, postcards, banners, and paid advertisement. Get leaders to beat the drum on these. Mention what's coming up weekly. Before the sermon each week, mention what is coming up and how this is their opportunity to invite. And then follow up. Review each community Sunday and ask, who did we reach? How did we connect? And what did we learn? So one of the things I see is churches doing some of these events, but not capitalizing them as opportunities to reach new people. So they may have a Be Out There Sunday, but they haven't publicized it as an opportunity for others to connect and for others to be involved in this opportunity. It's often the missing piece, and I think that's because just pulling off these events can be a lot, and we forget this component. So if that's you, then maybe you do less events and a lot more focus on reaching new people. So I do want to talk about something that's a little bit of the basics around these ideas. As you're reaching out to reach new people, there's a couple things you have to do just to make sure that you're reaching out and offering these events are that they're part of a whole system. So let me just mention this stuff briefly. Every church needs to have social media in today's world. You don't need to have a social media manager. You don't need to even spend a lot of time on social media. But social media is an important part of what it means to be the church these days. So you should be posting regularly. Your posts can be very simple things like inviting people to church on Sunday, sharing about an upcoming event, sharing about something good, something that's going on in the neighborhood with your community partners, inspiring people to take faith into their daily lives. I also want to invite you, as you work toward getting more people to know about God's love in Jesus Christ and be part of your faith community, to review your own website. You need to look at your website at least monthly and make sure it's up to date. Sometimes this is one of those jobs we totally forget about. So just a reminder to take a look at your website. Next, look at your campus. Look at your campus with a more critical eye. If you're worshiping in a school or a home, this is less important than for those who have a campus, but it's an important thing for all of us just to take a look at. Look at your campus from the perspective of a newcomer. Also, check out your Google reviews, Yelp, and Facebook reviews. Newcomers will look at these things, so you should too. Banners. Banners are one of the most helpful things. And a lot of times a church will invest in a banner or two and then just leave them. You really want to have banners coming up and coming down, at least every other week. After a while, people stop seeing them. And the whole point of a banner is to change it up. And then online worship. Online worship right now is down about 6% nationwide. More people are returning to in-person worship. Statistically, the number for in-person worship growth is 22% nationwide. That's all churches. So decrease in online worship, increase in in-person worship. People, though, will still be going to online worship, and they will especially be going to it before they come to see you in person. So make sure that what's going on Sunday morning is really making a difference for people. I want to just remind you, if you are the preaching pastor or you are involved in worship leadership, that the sermon in particular is very important in attracting and in keeping new people. A recent Gallup study found that 76% of people who attend church say that they go for sermons that teach them about Scripture. So this is newcomers and also people who are regular attenders. 75% also listed sermons that help them connect their beliefs to their lives as a major factor for attending. So preaching is the number one reason that people go to church. And it's not just any kind of preaching, but preaching that is relevant and biblical. So this might be a little hard to hear. Sometimes we think, oh, it's the community or it's the kids ministry. So those numbers statistically from Gallup right now are 38% say it's the music, 49% say it's the community, 59% say it's service, and 64% say it's a kids ministry. But we're looking at 76% list the sermon as number one. So all of these are important, yes, but the number one reason people go to church is good preaching. It is about community, of course, but it's really that community is started and cultivated and developed through good preaching. So just to remind you of that's one of the most important factors in church growth is sermons that are biblical and relevant to people's lives. So let's take a minute now and just pause, and all the things I have been saying that you've heard today, just jot down maybe a Community Sunday idea, or that you're going to check out your website and see how it's doing, or whatever it is, but just take a moment and do that. And I'll give you just a moment to write down what you want to work a little more on. Okay. Now I want to talk about welcoming new people. So we're doing some work to invite them. We're doing some work to offer things for them. Now I want to talk about how we welcome them. Is it natural to welcome? My experience in the local church is it's really not. That people come to church who are a regular part of the church to see their friends, to hear a good sermon, to connect. And really way down on their list is welcoming new people. I hope your experience is different. I hope you don't have this experience, but in 30 years of pastoring, I find that most congregations really struggle to welcome new people. I will always remember one of the churches I served. My first month there, I received a letter, an actual letter from someone who lived in the community. My first month at this church, I had written my newsletter article on hospitality and on welcoming. And she wrote to me and said that she'd gotten the newsletter and that she had visited my church several times before I had arrived. And she found it to be one of the most unfriendly churches in the community. She wished me good luck. She told me she would be praying for me, but she believed that this was a group of people who really did not care if anybody joined them. And I think she was probably right. I think that was really where they were at that time. They didn't stay there, but that's where they were at that time. My experience is that even people who are, very loving and kind and generous can have real trouble welcoming new people. So what can we do about this? I think that there's some ideas of how we can help our congregations learn to welcome and how we can help them shift the culture toward hospitality. So how do we do this? Well, I think one of the ways we do this is to have a sermon series about this, about welcoming, about making place for people. And it may be you don't do a whole sermon series on it, but that it's a constant illustration. In the course of a month, you're telling about welcoming, about including. I mean, this is, of course, a key theme in the New Testament, so it should be pretty easy to work into sermons. Sometimes telling stories about how folks were not welcomed is informative. People may not even recognize or understand. Short stories shared in worship. Now, when I say this one, what I mean is a couple things. First, share about your own experience being welcomed or not welcomed. And then also hear from people who were part of the church who can share some stories from their own life as well. Excuse me. We're just raising the understanding that this is an issue. Leadership training. This is an ongoing thing for leadership training. Leaders should be learning about welcoming constantly. And I share this book, The Art of Hospitality. I think it's a great book, not only for reading, but there's a workbook and there's a video and there's a couple other pieces for it. Book study. So this is a book I'd recommend for that. That could be in leadership training. It could also be in small groups, that this is something that small groups commit to learning about. One of the things that I think is really helpful is to have greeters in sections of the pews. You know, a lot of people sit in the same place all the time. So having somebody, let's say you could divide your pews or your chairs into 4 sections and have someone in each of those sections who is there to greet, to get to know people, to have a sense of people, and to connect with people. This is an easy way to do it. Welcome table. Some churches have a welcome table. I think it's really important to have one. And letting visitors know, if you're new with us today, we have welcome table. We'd love you to stop by. We have a small gift for you and some information to help you get to know about the church a little more. Meet the pastors. One of my traditions at my last church had been to stay up front after worship and invite newcomers to come up and have a bit of a meet and greet. Now, in many churches, there's a more traditional receiving line that happens after church. And regulars and newcomers may or may not be part of this, but you might want to play around with it. I found that this had a lot more impact than I anticipated it would, and that people would want to connect with the pastor. So they'd come up and say hi and introduce themselves. And I could connect with people who were part of the church after that when I went out to fellowship time. And then follow up. You know, unless you're some kind of a relational or relationship savant, and I'm sure some of you are, it's hard to track who the new people are. It's really important to have a follow-up procedure. We used a simple Excel spreadsheet, kind of look like this. You know, I know you can't see all the details, but basically the date, the name of the person, the dates they attended, their email address, their cell phone, and then the things we did internally to welcome them. So that might be a welcome postcard or a bag, or sending them an email, putting them on our weekly newsletter, putting them on our text in church and asking for prayer requests, whatever it is that you can do with the staff you have. But just tracking people, I think, is a huge part of making people feel welcome. So let's take a moment and think about, what is your plan to welcome new people? Will you do some more work on hospitality? Will you start with your leaders and do some training about that? Will you look at setting up greeters in sections of the pews? What will you do? Let's take a moment and write it down. Okay, and our last section is about incorporating new people. So you've worked with your church on getting them to invite, and you've welcomed some new people to your congregation. How do you incorporate them into the life of the church? Here are some workable ideas. I want to talk about, with what connects people, a bunch of things, but I want to start with the things that I think are the most helpful. Number one, small groups. Small groups are key in any church if you want to incorporate new people. The United Methodist Church actually was founded on small groups. So the Methodist movement is an original small group movement. And so it is important to look at what small groups we have, what small groups we can start. The easiest way to start small groups, if this has not been the tradition at your church, is to start small groups that meet to discuss the sermon. This can be over lunch or at church or at homes throughout the week. I have a friend who, at the end of his sermon, will create 2 to 3 questions. And that's what the small groups use as part of their time together. The second thing I would recommend to get people to connect to one another is to have them serve together. Serving, whether in the choir or the band or as ushers or in the community grocery store or at the homeless shelter, gets people to get to know each other. It builds relationships. And that's key with connecting people into the life of the church. Here's some other things that are essential. Fellowship time weekly. I know that coming back after COVID, some churches haven't gone back into doing fellowship time as regularly. And I would like to encourage you to do that. Offer fellowship time before and after worship. Some people will come early and they're on their way out to lunch afterward, or some people will stay for that time after church. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be coffee and donuts, but it has to be something. Testimonies. People get connected through hearing other people's stories. So make sure to feature other voices in worship. Testimonies and stories that are shared from people who are part of the congregation enable folks to get to know each other. Retreats. I'm working with a church right now that did a family camp, and they had a great time. It was an opportunity for them to get to know each other and to build relationships. Yours may not be a family camp. It may be a men's retreat or a women's retreat. But all of these kinds of times, time away, makes a huge difference. Having meals together. We used to have the regular tradition, at least in the Methodist Church, of having potlucks together. It'd be great to go back to something, whether that's pizza we order after church and sit together, something simple. Eating together is something we've historically always done, and it's a way to connect people. Social media. Social media is a great way to connect people. Your church should have 2 Facebook pages. One that's the page, that's an outward-facing page, and one that's a group, that's an inward-facing page. The group lets anybody who's in that group to share prayer requests and needs. So this is a way for anyone to participate and to connect with each other. Introducing people. I think one of the things that connects people is getting to know them a bit and then connecting them to other people. And related to this is inviting them to things that you're already doing. So if you're part of the quilting group, invite them. If you're part of the Bible study on Wednesday, invite them. If you know they have children of a certain age and you know someone who has children of that same age, connect them. And last, one-on-one with pastors and leaders. People are often looking to connect to church leadership or to the pastor. This can look a lot of ways with the regular coffee that the pastor might do in town, or it could look more one-on-one time that someone can schedule. So what is your plan to incorporate new people? Take a moment and just write that down. Okay, so what we've talked about today is that even though we are certainly in a time where there is a lot of church decline just because of cultural conditions, that there still are a lot of things the church can do. The church can do things that reach new people, that welcome new people, and that incorporate new people. every church should have a plan to reach new people in their community and to work that plan each week. Once the plan is set, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of time or energy, but it really is almost like a pair of glasses you put on, that you prioritize new people, you prioritize inviting, that you prioritize offering things at church that are not only for those who are there, but for those who have yet to hear about God's love in Jesus. We are in a time where there is great need. We live in a time where there are what they call deaths of despair, people who stop taking care of themselves, who overdrink, who commit suicide, who don't take care of their health. And this is a worldwide epidemic, but especially in the United States. And it's because people have lost hope in a lot of ways. We have something to say to that. We have a way and a light and a community that invites and incorporates people so that they might find the hope that we know. So this is me. I'm Nicole Reilley. And if you'd like to connect, if you have any questions, you can email me at my Gmail address. And I'm happy to connect. If you're looking for a coach for your church, or as a pastor, if you're looking for a coach for yourself, I'm happy to have that conversation as well. So it's been great being with you. I appreciate you being here. We had about 30 people at the last one and about 15 people at this one today. And I appreciate your time and energy. And I hope that this was a good use of your Wednesday morning.